Now I am become the destroyer of the world.
Ever seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the enemy sound? Ever seen a young growing old, trying to make a silver cry? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become the destroyer of the world.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.
Well, a very warm welcome. I can't believe that we're back here Tuesday by Tuesday. I can believe it. It's a wonderful privilege to fellowship with you, to serve you, and to share with you nugget truths. It's exciting for the times and the season that we are in, and that you journey with us here. And to the existing viewers, new viewers, those who won't be watching live, who will be watching recorded, our prayer as this will really embellish you in truth, that it will uplift you and take you to that next level in your spirituality, in yourself. It will navigate you. You know, you are a real blessing to us. And the purpose of these programs is that we can walk in these times together. I want to welcome some lovely viewers that we have joining in the live chat. Bakacham, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. You know, your contributions, they are so rich. Gabriella from Finland, again, she was moderating for us on Friday. She did a wonderful job. Today we have Stuart Birch moderating for us. I really could not do these programs without them. They are foundational to helping in everything that it takes, including Tina and Elaine with posting, Ellen with posting everything out. I just want to welcome you all for your very rich contributions that make the program even much better, and it helps navigate people understanding what you bring, what you answer, the questions that you delve into. So this is what I want to do. I want to go straight into it. I like sharing for a couple of minutes before Dr. Pidgeon comes on what I've called nugget truths, but they are really deep that I want to walk in with you. And I want to ask you this straight away. How do we know what's happening right now in relation to Russia, in relation to Russia versus Ukraine, that it's not World War III? Because of two reasons. 4 Ezra, also known as 2nd Esdras, shows us this. It talks about the dragons of Arabia and one other factor. So you see, you have to take scripture to prove the point. Here, the point is, what will World War III be between? Who will World War III be between, rather? And then you take Albert Pikes Letters to Mazzini about the Illuminati's plan, which outlines 3 world wars. Albert Pike, he wrote these letters in 1871. If you don't know, he was the high priest of Satan in Freemasonry. He was known as the 33-degree Schreier. But you know what? There are many levels above the 33. There are actually 111 levels of Freemasonry, but they're all kept secret in the closet. But when you look at it, these are really the true Babylonian worshippers. They are the synagogue of Satan. Now, Pike, he was an occultist. He was a grand master. He was the creator of the southern jurisdiction of the Mason Scottish Rite Order. Can you see how deeply he is involved, where he has his hand, the power that he commands? Who he was writing to, Mazzini, his first name is Giuseppe. Giuseppe Mazzini was an Italian revolutionary leader in the mid-1800s. He was the director of the Illuminati. That's why there was an exchange of communication of this letter with the 3 points I'm going to mention to you. The world wars, the first, the second, the third world war. Now consider this, right? Every government today, so in the United Kingdom, we've got 2 parties. We've got the Conservatives and we have the Labour Party. In America, you would have the Democrats and you would have the Republicans. All these parties, they employ a think tank. Well, the Masons are no different, and Pike, his letters in this relation carry that significance. They reveal the Illuminati's plans for the 3 world wars. Albert Pike, this was his main commission, this was his main directive that he wanted to bring about the end times, to bring about the revealing of the Antichrist, who can not come about until the midway point. Now, that's important to remember, the midway point of the tribulation. So he and Mazzini, effectively, they worked out this blueprint. Yeah, you can say that they are the architects, but Yah is in control. Whilst they orchestrated this plan, Yahuwah is always in control. I say this so many times because I want you to believe it and get it into your spirit, oxygenate it into you. Yah is in control. Yah uses even evil agents to bring about his will, to bring about his judgments. And it's certainly this case. The Illuminati may think they're in control, but they are not. They're the ones who are being hoaxed there. Yah is in control. Yah uses everything as an agent. Now, this letter that I referred to, it shows the 3 world wars that I've said were planned many generations back, written in 1871, outlining what would happen in World War I, World War II, World War III, the future World War. So understand this, World War I happened exactly as planned between the 2 parties. 1914 to 1918, that was World War I. Exactly as it was written in 1871. This is the point that I'm wanting to emphasize to you. That was 43 years before the outbreak of World War I, outlining how it would happen. World War II took place in 1939 to 1945. Again, the same thing, exactly as Pike had written to Mazzini. Between the 2 parties, it came to pass. Fascism and political Zionism. Here, there was a 70-year difference after Pike's letters to Mazzini. Do you see it? Therefore, through the eyes of a prophet, and obviously just looking at it from a research point, you can see that World War III will happen exactly as they have planned out in Pike's letters to Mazzini. It's part of the agenda. It will be between political Zionists, who are the 13 families that rule the world, and also, and this is key, Islam. Islam and the 13 families that rule the world. They're called the Zionists, political Zionists. That is key to drop into your spirit and for you to have an understanding of, as we live in these times, as we go forward, as we see what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. How do we know this? Again, because of what I've mentioned about 4 Ezra, sometimes called 2nd Ezra's. They are called the dragons of Arabia. That's talking about Iran, Middle East, Mystery Babylon, the political Zionists. This is what happens and will happen and how it will happen. So therefore, and this is critical, Russia and Ukraine cannot be World 3 until, I said until, you see involvement, and involvement, the word there, involvement in itself is important, of Islam, the most key word. You have to see involvement of Islam, and then you can take that as a prophetic indicator, and then you will know that we've reached the end of those days, the end of days. We've reached the great war, the sword, as it is written in the word, what the seals talk about. Then you will know we're there. That's the marker. So look with me at Yah and how he brings the sword through the land. Last week, I spoke on the 4 sword judgments. I just want to touch on one of them from Ezekiel 14, which is verse 17. The 4 sword judgments of the sword. It simply says this: or if I bring a sword upon the land and say, sword, go through the land, so that I cut off man and beast from it. That's saying that the sword will be the war, will be World War III. It will only be World War when Pikes' letter to Mazzini outlining his vision of World War III comes to pass. Exactly how the Illuminati want it. That's exactly how they want it. But this is where we have to remember, again, as I said to you, Yah is in control. It is Yahuwah's judgment. It is written in stone. It is written in scripture. So be encouraged, not dismayed. Now, let's look at Islam, because it's written in the scripture, and I want to show you how it's revealed. Now, the actual wording in Pike, in Albert Pikes' letter, says this. So I'm opening the quote as if he is speaking it. It will be fomented, not formulated, fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agita. Agita means agents of the Illuminati, because the political Zionists and Islam, they want the war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Do you see it? The plan that they come against one another and annihilate one another. Islam against political Zionism. That's the first part. And whilst that's going on, he goes on in his letter to say, and the rest of the nations, they will destroy one another, atheism and Christianity particularly, so that they can pave the way for the Antichrist and release, this is now, I'm opening the quote again, this is Albert Pikes' words to Mazzini, so that they can release the pure doctrine of Lucifer brought finally into the public square, into the public view, end of quote. That is the purpose for everything. At the moment, it's hidden in plain sight. It's all hush, but that's what they want to do. And at that point, this is the revealing of the Antichrist, which cannot happen, as I said before, until the midway point, which is spoken about in 2 Thessalonians 2. Then he will reveal himself as Lucifer. That's Hasatan. It goes on to say, as I've said, the other nations, they will become divided, listen to this, on issues and constrained to fight to the point of complete and physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. So now, Dr. Pidgeon is here, and I want to hand over to him very shortly in a few minutes. I just want to pick up on this point. We have to look at Islam because it's mentioned as Arabia in scripture. Islam is referred, as we've said, in 4 Ezra, 2nd Ezra, as the dragons of Arabia. And I want to focus on that from Psalm 83, which says this: they have taken crafty counsel against you, your people are the sheltered ones, the true believers. The crafty counsel is this Illuminati letter, is the one world order, is the Georgia Guidestones. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you. Now that's important, this confederacy. It's very prophetic. And here comes Islam. And the tents of Edom and of the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gelab, Ermon, and Alamak, Philistines, the inhabitants of Tyre, Assyria, have also joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. The emphasis there is to show you how Islam has been written about all this time and to see how it comes to play in the situation with Russia and Ukraine. The crafty counsel, understand it, see the link with the letter Pike to Mazzini, New World Order, Georgia Guidestones, who, all those different things, look at it from this perspective. And I'm going to end with this. Isaiah 21. I love this because this is Isaiah seeing World War III for himself. So it's Isaiah 21. And it says, the burden of the desert of the sea, as the whirlwinds in the Negev pass through, the whirlwinds. So it comes from the desert, from a terrible land. A grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer deals treacherously, and the spoiler spoils. Do you see the severity of what will happen and how the spoiler spoils the treachery? This is important. Verse 16, for thus has Adonai said unto me, within a year, according to the years of a hailing, within a year is key here, all the glory of Kedar shall fall. Kedar is Islam, is Arabia. And the remnant of the number of the archers, the mighty men of the children of Kedar shall be diminished. They shall be diminished. For Yahuwah, Elohai of Israel, has spoken it. And then if you go into Ezra, behold a horrible vision. It simply says this. This is powerful, and it ends with this. This is how Arabia is connected to it. Behold a horrible vision, and the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arav, that's Arabia, shall come out of many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried, and the wind upon earth. And all which they hear, they shall fear and tremble. My emphasis here today is to show you Yah is in control. Islam has to be involved as we move forward to see the signs of a third world war, so that you can see where we are going. I want to leave it with you there, because we have to hand over to Dr. Pidgeon so he can share as he feels led in any direction, and pick up from last week as well. We always have this issue with the sound.
How about now?
Great, wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Pidgeon. We're excited. I'm personally excited to have you and give your input into from last week and today. What's on your heart? There's an expectancy spiritually within my spirit, and I, from the people that I've communicated with, the same thing. So, as I usually do, hand over to you. Thank you.
Well, I think there's lots of good things on the horizon. They don't look that way right now. You know, particularly in the UK, things look bleak. You know, hi, Gabriella, good to see you. They look bleak, you know, Jessica. I mean, when you're talking about the government coming out and saying, oh, we're going to be rationing food, oh, we're going to be rationing electricity and rationing heat, and we're going to keep, you know, the power plant we're going to decommission this year, we're going to keep it going. You know, we're going to go switch over to coal-fired plants. We're going to do all these things to try to somehow recover what is going on from really a mistaken policy decision to sanction Russia. Now, with all of that being said, much of Europe in its unified front is now crumbling. The many nations in Europe are now saying, forget the sanctions, let's go buy Russian natural gas. And Russia has come out and said, hey, look, we'll sell you wheat, you just stop the sanctions. We'll sell you fertilizer, just stop the sanctions. We'll be happy to do it, but you have to stop the sanctions. Well, you know, one of the big questions that I think is before everybody in Europe is Joe Biden an effective and, you know, intelligent leader that they should be following? And the answer is no. I mean, that's the simple answer. You know, you should not be following the lead of the Biden administration at all. And so this is going to become very important. And I'm hoping that the government there in the UK is going to figure this out. It's a very simple equation. Just ignore Joe Biden. He's just wrong. I mean, you know, there people in the United States are looking at him and going, you know, this guy is adrift in a sea of irrationality and wrong decision making. And to sanction Russia has done what? How's it worked for Russia? It's been horrible for Russia. They've had record prices on oil, record prices on gas. Their revenues coming in from oil and gas are 24% higher than they were during the time of the sanction. The ruble has increased 15% against the euro, 11% against the dollar. They're becoming richer and more powerful, and their wheat crop is being blessed with a huge wheat crop this year. So what happened with the sanctions? I thought we were going to hurt these guys. And now the Swiss are talking about ending the SWIFT system entirely. Well, we might as well wipe out SWIFT. Well, yeah, you might as well, because if you don't get on board with what China and Russia are doing, you're going to be out of the loop where
Mm.
all the transactions in Asia are going to be taking place. So now what? So what you're seeing is that the sanctions were a complete backfire. Now,
Okay.
let's see if we can breathe some cognizance into the European leadership. Repeat after me. The sanctions backfired. Repeat after me. The sanctions backfired.
Backfired.
We
Mm.
thought they were going to hurt Russia, but they hurt us, not Russia. Russia didn't get hurt at all. We're getting hurt big time. So, since we shot ourselves in the face with a backfire, what's the remedy? Undo that which you did. Undo it. Look, forget the humbling nature of it, and concern yourself with whether or not you're ever going to be reelected to anything, including dog catcher, if you don't do it, right? I mean, you're going to be rolled out of town on a rail if you
Mm.
don't do it. There's a recent general in Italy has come out and said the obvious. We shouldn't be putting any more arms in Ukraine. That's a ridiculous notion. We should
Yeah.
have told Ukraine to stop doing what it's doing in the Donbass and start behaving like a responsible world citizen. But we didn't do that because the Biden administration, which is engaged in financial corruption up to its shoulder
Right.
in Ukraine, told everybody we have to stand by Ukraine.
Mm.
Ukraine puts up this peacock to lead the nation who's just a fool with a loud mouth. He's a vile horn, out of Daniel 7 with a big mouth, right?
Yeah.
And he's standing around telling, the first thing that came out of his mouth was the U.S. should come over here and impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. The first thing that came out of his mouth was the United States should go to full nuclear war with Russia in order to support my illegitimate regime in Ukraine. One that is not bounded in democracy at all. He jailed all of his opponents, jailed the opposition party, criminalized all the television stations that were criticizing his regime. He is a dictator, pure and simple. There's no democracy. There's no element of democracy, not at all, zero. So what is Europe doing defending this fellow who has incorporated 4 regiments of Nazis into his official military machine? Whether you're talking Azov Battalion, Nazis, Right Sector, Nazis, Svobodna, Nazis, or Banderites, all Nazis. So, that's not my opinion. That's their self-proclamation. That's what's on, when they tattoo a swastika on their arm, you have an idea that they might have a sympathy in that direction. How can Germany possibly, under German laws, how do Germans put 1 dime into a country that has Nazis working in its military? How do they do that under German law? I mean, how do you do that? I don't understand that. And so what you see is here in Europe, last one to drop the sanction regimen is going to be a rotten egg. Okay. I mean, that's what's going to happen. If you don't do it, you're going to be so far outside the loop that the people in your own country are going to turn on you with a vengeance. When there's no food, people are going to get mad. So you want to make sure that there's food, and you want to make sure that there's heat. And it's simple. You can do it right now. Turn on Ukraine and say, we're not standing with the blue and yellow anymore. Or in the case of the way America put up their flag, the yellow and the blue, because we put up their flag upside down at the last Joint Chiefs meeting, which is telling you something, right?
Right.
We had 7 Ukrainian flags out there, and they were all upside down.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, that gives you an indication of what's happening with the U.S. The U.S. is recognizing, okay. I mean, let me give you an example of the kind of stunt that the U.S. would do.
Yeah, please.
Biden's bragging about, we're sending in Javelin anti-tank missiles. Okay, we only sent in half the weapon. We sent in the Javelin, but we didn't send in the launcher. How do we use this? Well, you're missing a couple of components, right? Like what? The ones that make it work? Yeah, that component.
Exactly.
And So all of this stuff is just, it's ridiculous. Beyond the theater is just beyond anything that's even worthy of being discussed. But in
That's
the
right.
meantime, there's no grain in Europe. In the meantime, there's no natural, and the story is now, Jessica, I mean, I'll just tell you straight out. The UK has published an analysis showing that come this fall, Norway, which provides 50% of the natural gas to the UK, is
Yeah.
going to cut that supply in half because Norway needs it. Another percentage that comes out of the Netherlands and out of Belgium, they're going to cut that in half because the Netherlands needs it. The
Yeah.
United States, which has been a supplier, not much of a supplier, but it's going to cut its provision in half because the
Yeah.
US needs it. So already the press is saying in the UK, heat rationing, food rationing, gas rationing, all of this stuff is coming. But it doesn't have
Absolutely.
to come. It does not have to be there. It doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
It has to happen. It's a change of heart and a change of mind.
Yes,
And
you were saying this on Friday.
and it's already happening. It's happening in Switzerland. Can I tell you a
Really?
story? Oh yeah.
Please.
Well, Stephen Hawking. You might remember.
Yeah.
Okay, he was the one. He wrote a brief something of time. I forget the name of the book now. But in this book, he explains that he was the progenitor of the notion of the Big Bang Theory. And after he lived with this Big Bang Theory for about 7 years, he decided that he was dead wrong and divorced himself from the Big Bang Theory, right? And that happened in 1986.
Okay.
The school system in the United States continues to teach that the Big Bang Theory is the leading scientific theory.
Yes. Yeah.
Because guess what? They're the last ones to the party. Oh, you mean the guy that invented that said it's wrong? Yeah. Oh, we didn't know that. Right. You're supposed to be educators and you don't know it. Right? Because you're not up to date on anything. So you don't want to be the last country in Europe that realizes, hey, we're done with the sanctions. Hey, we're going to buy natural gas with rubles like the Russians asked, like Germany is doing, right? Like Hungary is doing, like Bulgaria is doing, like Serbia is doing. Even Greece is going to do it. But no, not us. We're too good for that kind of thing. We'd rather be in the dark and, starving and freezing in the dark than to actually buy gas and rubles. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. End the sanction routine. The war in Ukraine is over. It's over. The Ukrainians have lost. The Ukrainian army is in a complete retreat, an unorganized retreat. They're running for everywhere. Poroshenko, the guy who was behind Zelensky before the peacock took over, Poroshenko has tried to escape Ukraine 3 times, and they won't let him out. Oh, no. Aren't you Poroshenko? Yeah. No, you can't come into Poland, and you can't come into Romania. No, you just get back over there and hang out in Kiev, right? So this is what's happening. So there's been a change in the world. Recognize the change and get on board. The Swiss are talking about abandoning the SWIFT system. The SWIFT system that Joe Biden used as a club to smash Vladimir Putin in the face. We're going to teach you. We're going to punish you. We're going to make it hurt. We're going to make it unacceptable for you to come into Ukraine and interrupt our money laundering scheme, our human trafficking scheme, our human organ trafficking scheme, our biolabs and bioweapon development, and all our kickbacks. We're not going to let you. We're going to punish you for doing that. Okay, how are you going to do that? We're going to kick you out of SWIFT. Well, what's happened as a result of kicking them out of SWIFT? Now SWIFT is collapsing, and it's being replaced by a new transaction system that's being developed in Asia.
Oh, that's dangerous then, right?
Well, extremely dangerous, because what you're going to see is the banking system in Europe is about to plummet. You mentioned Islam in the show, right? There's some very interesting things that happen in Islam when you go back and you look at the history of Islam. That initially we're talking like 800 BC. The axial tilt of the Earth was calculated at some 23 point something degrees. Okay, this was calculated by an astrologer in the 9th century BC. This was before there was an Illuminati, before there was computer generated images, CGI, any of this stuff.
Yeah.
They had calculated the axial tilt. Okay, so one of the first group of people to recalculate the axial tilt was Islam. and they recalculated the axial tilt in the 7th century AD. So what happened? In the 8th century AD. So what happens? You see with the rise of Islam an intellectualism that superseded the West. You go back to the year 800 AD in Europe, Charlemagne was declared to be the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman. He couldn't read or write.
Really?
Yeah. And the Dark Ages in Europe at that time were dark indeed. The whole Justinian code of the Roman law and all of this, which was replete with written, thousands and thousands of documents, completely collapsed because nobody could read it and nobody could write. And so what you saw instead was Europe for, from around, right around 600 AD until feudalism starts coming in 1066 with William the Conqueror, right? And feudalism still had a long way to go before we started to see reform. But from that 500-year period, the average European lived in a dugout circle, and in this dugout they put up logs like this. Then they would build a floor with a hole in the middle and a ladder that would come up through the hole. And then above, this is where the cows and the goats and the sheep and the chickens, they would all stay above in the barn. Okay, so you had all the cow poop and the all of this overhead, while the people slept down in the basement with a fire going right up the middle, so the smoke went up this way, right?
Yeah.
Now this is the way the average European lived, and then they would come outside and they had a big pond of rainwater, and into that they would throw the malt and the barley and the yeast, and they'd end up with this big pot of ale in front of the house. The average European consumed 8 gallons of that stuff a day.
Oh my goodness. Alcoholics. Wow, goodness.
So what you're talking about was there were those who fought, there were those who prayed, and those who farmed. And the ones who farmed were drunk all the time.
Yeah.
So this was the Dark Ages, right? And the average life expectancy was about 32 years. And
really?
Every disease known to man, I mean, it was filthed out. And by the time you get to the 14th century with the rise of bubonic plague, the bubonic plague came in from filth conditions.
Yeah.
Rats carrying filthy stuff. People would take their chamber pots, throw it right out the front window on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Whether the person walking below or not. The stench of London had to be absolutely horrific.
Yes.
Absolutely horrific. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is talked about. We didn't get flush toilets till the 20th century. Well, late 19th century. But we didn't get sewer system flush toilets. So what were people doing? People were throwing their chamber pot right out the front door.
Yeah, that's right.
So what do the streets of Birmingham smelled like? Or the streets of Manchester, or the streets of Liverpool? What do you think they smelled like? Right? Stench was horrific.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so anyway, this was the world. But in the meantime, the Islamic culture is blooming. In the Arabic culture, they developed the zero. They start developing higher mathematics. They're developing higher astrological principles. They're developing measures of law. And so of the areas of the world, the Christian world was the least developed area of the world. The least developed. The farthest behind, right? The most ignorant. The ones living in the Dark Ages. Maybe the tribes in Africa and the tribes in Southeast Asia were living more primitively.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were.
I think so.
But compared to Islam, the Christian world was way, way behind.
Wow.
Now you see the only thing that begins to change this is you begin to see that feudalism that's introduced by William the Conqueror in Britain. This feudalism begins to build an echelon. And in this echelon of feudalism, those at the top had to set themselves apart from the people immediately below them. And they had a system called sub-infeudation. So you would have the king, and then you would have the dukes, and then you would have the counts, and then you would have the earls, right? Well, between the earl and the count, maybe let's add the viscount, and then, and we'll add the archduke, and we'll add the this, and we'll add the that. And so there was sub-infeudation in between the layers. of people coming in. Well, the
Mm.
feudalism was who you know, not what you know or a rule of law. It was who you know. It was your allegiance to the man that would allow you to move up in the feudal system.
Mm.
So the landowners began to take on a completely different style. They had to dress differently than the people who were living in the demesne or the people who were living
Yeah.
in the right? The farmers, they had to dress differently, they had to act differently. And so because of that, you begin to see this echelon, this hierarchy of these are people who dress up, these are people who don't, right?
Right.
These are people who change their clothes for dinner, these are people who don't. These are
Mm.
people who have money, these are people who don't. And so you begin to see this echelon. Well, in this echelon also came what? Education. Now, it was Arthur II, King Arthur II, who had his kingdoms situated in Wales,
Yeah.
who created Cambridge. He created Cambridge.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And decided that Cambridge University was going to be the site for a new university, right? And so
Okay.
Cambridge and Oxford, and of course, the church was teaching in the abbey. So you would see abbeys throughout all of the UK, including
Yeah.
Ireland, all these
Mhm.
abbeys were built, and these were the houses of scholarship. Now, in addition to that, you also had the housing of scholarship through the Druids, who the
Mm.
Druids had 20 years of study to obtain the status of Archdruid. That's not the
Mhm.
case in modern Druids. Modern Druids are a bunch of tree huggers, But the ancient Druids were
Yeah.
academics, right? They studied
Mm.
botany, they studied mathematics, they studied astrology, they studied music. They had a
Yeah.
very large parameter of understanding. And
Mm.
with this kind of intelligence, you see that intelligence begins to grow back again in Britain. So by the time you get to the revolution that takes place, when does the revolution take place? What's the foremost moment in European history? It is the destruction of Constantinople in 1453 by the Ottomans.
Wow.
Now, once this takes place, the greatest church in all Christendom was the Hagia Sophia. This was the church in Constantinople, the greatest church in Christendom, and it was the most important church in Christendom. And the Ottomans took the church. And
Yeah.
part of the reason they took Constantinople is because Western Rome would not support Eastern Rome. They would not
Okay.
support it. Why not? Because in 1054, you had the Great Schism. This was a breaking off of the Eastern Orthodoxy. Yeah, hey, Brachim, Shalom. It was the breaking off of Eastern Orthodoxy from Catholicism. The two
Mm.
split. And they split over really a kind of minor ideology. But one of the main factors was that the Pope asserted himself as the bishop who was more equal than the other bishops.
Mm.
There is no Pope listed in Scripture anywhere. There's no
No.
Pope, right?
No.
There's bishops
Absolutely.
and deacons. There's no
Mm.
cardinals. There's no Pope. There's no Dagon fish hat. None of that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this guy in Rome comes out and says, I am the appointed Pope. I'm the top dog,
Mm.
right? It was Gregory who said that. And by the way,
Okay.
Gregory said that in the 590s AD, around the same time that Arthur was building Cambridge.
Mhm.
Gregory was building the abbot or the abbey of Augustine in Canterbury.
Okay. Oh, it's a good
And
timeline you're providing.
oh yeah, and by the way, the remnant of that abbey is still there.
Yeah.
Augustine's abbey, still
Yeah.
there. Okay, so anyway, so the point is, but by the time we get to 1054, there's a schism, and orthodoxy continues in the manner of the church from the 1st and 2nd century. Rome, it begins to embark on its own course. Oh, well, we're the great city of Rome, and we can doctor up the Codex Vaticanus, so we can change this, we can change that. Well, the difference is, of course, Rome is where Protestantism began. Rome is where the glass splattered and broke.
Mm.
Orthodoxy didn't splatter and break. There was one church,
Mm.
all of those areas, right? So, at any rate, with the fall of Constantinople, there's about 20,000 manuscripts in the basement of the Hagia Sophia,
Mhm.
the Holy Church of Holy Wisdom, that make its way north.
Yeah.
Get them out of here because the Ottomans aren't going to take care of them. So they took these manuscripts and they moved them north to the Netherlands.
Mm.
And when they got up to the Netherlands, there were guys, academics up there who said, hey, look at this. We got something other than the Codex Vaticanus here, and we can create a complete Bible with all of these scrolls that we've got.
Yeah.
So Desiderius Erasmus created the first Textus Receptus in the early 1500s. Now, this transfer of the knowledge out of Byzantium into Central Europe now is going to change everything.
Yeah.
It's going to change everything because with Erasmus's translation of this scripture, now all of a sudden scripture is in the hands of everybody.
Yeah.
So Tyndale transcribes it into English. Henry VIII breaks off from Rome. When Henry VIII breaks off from Rome, how can he break off from Rome if he doesn't have his own scripture? Well, Tyndale provides him the scripture, right?
Yeah.
And so at this point now, you see that true Protestantism begins with Henry VIII's divorce from Rome.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of people say, oh, no, it was Martin Luther before that who broke off from Rome. And Martin Luther didn't break off from Rome. Rome excommunicated him. He didn't break away from Rome. They excommunicated him. But when you see what was happening there in Britain, you see all of a sudden Henry VIII and a Protestant Bible.
Yeah.
Which very quickly became the 1537 Coverdale, one of the best English translations of scripture ever done, the Coverdale. And so now all of a sudden we see that Islam now begins to fade, right? 1492, the Alhambra decree in Spain on the 9th of Av forces the Jews out of Spain and Portugal. Leave and don't take your money with you. Leave your money here, right? So they would leave, and a lot of people swallowed gems and swallowed their silver and gold, and they'd get to Morocco, and the Muslims would gut them so that they could steal the gold that was in their stomach.
Yeah.
The 3 ships of Columbus were full of Spanish Jews.
You froze. Just repeat that again, that last bit that you said.
The 3 ships of Columbus were full of Spanish Jews.
Oh.
The Alhambra decree came down on the 9th of Av, 1492, and on the 10th of Av is when Columbus left for the New World.
It's fascinating. Wow,
Yeah.
fascinating.
But then you begin to see this rise of Christendom now, and Christendom is going to assert itself over Islam. And of course, what happens in Britain, where they expressed a love for freedom because they were free from the Pope. And the common law in Britain, which is unusual to the law in the continent. You know, the continent's under Napoleonic Code. Britain is under the common law, as is Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They're under the common law. And under the common law, the judges found, hey, we find that capitalism is the best form of life for our people to live under. And so all of a sudden you saw what they called the home industries. You know, you would see women would buy a spinning wheel and they'd be spinning at home, right?
Okay.
There would be cotton gins at home. There would be all these domestic kind of industries that would begin at home. And then, of course, the steam engine is developed, right? Now, once the steam engine is developed, then we start into the industrial age. Well, the industrial age is going to save Britain from the depravity of the bubonic plague. It's going to save Britain from that great famine that came in the 1800s, where the Irish died. The British did not, because, of course, they were industrialized. And this industrialization marked the difference of the people in the UK. So there's a huge history here that belongs to Protestantism, that belongs to the divorcing themselves from Rome. Huge tradition.
Really interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So the point being is that when we talk about where we are now in the country, you know, to lose the handle on moving away from the papal dominion is the biggest mistake you could make. And of course, look what the situation is. You know that France, which is one of the top EU nations, is a self-professed Catholic nation.
Yes. Mm.
Austria is a self-professed Catholic nation.
Mm.
Czechia is a self-professed Catholic nation.
Mm.
Spain and Portugal are self-confessed Catholic nations. Italy is a self-confessed Catholic nation,
Definitely. Mm.
right? And so who do you think has the spiritual governance over those nations? It's the Pope.
Yes.
And the current
Yes.
Pope, like many elected officials in the Western world, is a usurper. He doesn't even hold the full papacy.
No. No.
It still retains elements of the papacy that Francis does not have.
Mm.
So what's this guy Francis doing in there? Well, he is in the process of helping guys like Klaus Schwab move into the Great Reset.
Mm.
Now, he published a piece, Jessica, called the Laudate Si in 2015.
Right. The Pope, or is that who
The
you
Pope.
said? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Right.
In
Mhm.
fact, let me see if I can put that. I'm going to see if I can. I don't know if I can chat here even. I'm going to see if I can. Yeah, let me. I'm going to add that right here. The Laudate Si, 2015. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So the Laudate Si, 2015. This document that he published was an extremely dangerous document,
Mm.
and he proclaimed, basically the Green New Deal, population decimation and population control, and all of these things that came from Pope Francis. So he is the spiritual progenitor of the democide that's being exacted against the earth right now. Now, this democide is coming out of, you were mentioning it before, the Illuminati. You were talking about Mazzini and
Yes.
and Albert Pike.
Mhm.
And these guys were all given permission by the Pope to act with alacrity in the United States. Okay, because
Agreed.
Rome had succeeded against the United States following the War of 1812.
Yeah.
Before 1812, Catholicism was outlawed in the United States. Did you know that?
No. Wow.
Christmas was banned. It was banned. You could not have
Yeah.
a Christmas festival,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
George Washington crossed the Potomac to invade the German mercenaries fighting for the British Army on Christmas Eve because he
Yeah.
knew they'd be celebrating Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And it was illegal in the States.
Mm.
And Catholicism was illegal. We've got our first Catholic president in 1960 with John F. Kennedy, and it was a quote unquote scandal.
Wow. That about being illegal in the States? No, I was not aware of that. Everywhere else, yes. That's quite
Oh, yeah.
fascinating, and how you link it in with Kennedy.
But of course, Rome succeeded against the United States following the War of 1812 and the rebuilding of Washington, D.C. And by the way, when Washington, D.C. was burned in the War of 1812, it was a handful of shacks on a swamp. There were 2,300 people living in Washington, D.C. at the time it was burned in 1812. 2,300, because it was a swamp. There was a handful of shacks in a swamp when the British burned Washington, D.C.
Mm.
When it was rebuilt, suddenly it was rebuilt with a Roman cupola, an Egyptian obelisk, a
Mm.
pentagram.
Yeah.
The foot of the pentagram is the White House, right? A Masonic compass and square over the mall
Yeah.
with the George Washington monument on the G. I mean,
Mm.
it is a satanic place, with statues of Isis and Columbia, and George Washington exalted as a Greek
Mm.
god,
Mm.
and Albert Pikes statue right in the middle of the
That's
square,
right. Yep. That's right.
right?
Mm.
So when you see this stuff, and the reason that a Roman cupola was built is because Rome took over. Rome
Mm.
took over. And once Rome took over, then now you see what's the condition in the United States today? Well, 7 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are Roman Catholic.
Mm.
President, pro-abortion, murderous guy that he is, claims to be a Catholic.
Mm.
The Speaker of the House claims to be a Catholic, although she just got excommunicated. I mean, so who do you think these people are, right?
Mm. Mm.
Right? So Rome has complete control over the United States now, complete control. And even though it hasn't imposed Sunday worship, even though the United States does not describe itself as a Catholic nation, it most assuredly is in the hands of
Yes.
Catholics. Now, most
Yeah.
people don't know this as well, but we have agencies, intelligence agencies, the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Intelligence from the DoD, Department of Defense Intelligence Agency. All of those people are staffed primarily out of Georgetown University, which is a Jesuit university.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So virtually all of the intelligence community is trained in Jesuit schools.
Yes. Yeah.
And they operate on behalf of Rome. They do not operate on behalf of the United States.
Mm. Mm.
It's very straightforward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So at any rate, when you see all these things come together, when we start taking a look at what's going to happen in the UK, I do think that good things are going to happen in the UK. I think because this Italian general has broke ranks and said, what are we doing supporting Ukraine? No more weapons into Ukraine and no more of this nonsense. Stop this stuff, right?
Mm.
In Ukraine, have you ever heard of what's called the Holodomor?
No. No.
Well, the Holodomor is a well-known phrase in Ukraine because in Ukraine in 34, 35, Stalin came in and seized all the Ukrainian wheat and took it back into Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this because the Ukrainian farmers were refusing to collectivize. And what he meant by collectivize, the Ukrainian farmers owned their land, and he told them, you don't own anything. We, the sovereign, own all of it. And we're taking you farmers and moving you guys out to the Urals so you can farm out there. And we're bringing those people that live in the Urals to farm your land. And the Ukrainians were like, no, you're not. And so he said, okay, fine. So he took all of their wheat for 2 years in a row. 10 million Ukrainians starved to death. 10 million.
Yeah.
Now, this starvation of 10 million Ukrainians is called the Holodomor. The Holodomor.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So now there's discussion about this Ukrainian peacock, Zelensky,
Yeah.
selling all the Ukrainian grain in trade for weapons.
Which they don't know how to use either. They're too above their grade of training.
Exactly. I mean, you send in these sophisticated weapons, but you don't even send in all the parts. Let alone, you don't even send in the whole assembly, let alone the training. And then here you go, hope you can defend yourself. And these guys are out there defending themselves against Russia with World War I battle strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most crazy stuff I've ever seen. I mean, so what are you guys thinking? This isn't the Tsar going to come rushing at you with half-armed people. Anyway, because of this, because Zelensky is willing to sell the grain out in order to get weapons, the Ukrainian people are starting to whisper the word Holodomor. Holodomor. It's
okay.
grain, you see.
Wow. Yeah.
And it come very quickly because how is it that the Irish starved from 1847 to 1850? There was plenty of food in Ireland, but it was shipped out. It was shipped out.
Yeah.
And who was his name? Duvalier in London said, well, maybe this will take care of the Irish problem. Well, that statement is what guaranteed the Irish Revolution in 1916. That statement by Duvalier, that guaranteed the revolution. Now, it's the same thing here. If Europe says, well, we need the wheat, ship it out to us and we'll send you in some weapons that you can't use, that you can sell in Serbia on the black market. If we do that, the Ukrainians are already starting to say Holodomor, Holodomor, Holodomor.
Okay.
Right? And so this becomes a very big deal. So, I mean, is Europe going to participate in that? Is Europe going to be part of that? You think history is not going to register that?
They would have to, wouldn't they? Yeah.
They will. I can tell you
do it again.
Yeah, they're going to do it again. And just as we look back on the famine that was imposed on Ireland in 1847 to 1850, which, by the way, the Irish have not forgiven the British for. Well, I think they have maybe by now. But the Ukrainians have not forgiven the Russians for that starvation period. And now they're going to do it again. Now they're going to do it again, right? So this should not happen, especially since the Russians have expressed a willingness to export grain and to export fertilizer and to export gas and to export oil. Just drop the sanctions.
Yeah. Mm. And just before you go any further, we've come to that time that I always hate, where we're just down to 2 minutes. So bear that in mind as you bring it to a close.
How'd that happen? How'd we get here so quickly, Jessica?
I know.
Well, I just want to say this. I do believe that there is going to be rationality is going to return to the government in the UK. And I do think when it returns that the government of the UK is responsibly going to say, the Biden administration doesn't know what they're doing. They're being led by a demented individual who has no intellectual capacity to lead anybody. And we're done listening to him. Mm. And as soon as you do that and you restore your relationship with Russia, you're going to be right back in perfect health again. As soon as you do it, you'll go right back to, hey, our economy's functioning again. Hey, gas has dropped down to only $6 a gallon, you know. Mm. I mean, right now, what is it, $12 a liter, $12 a gallon? Yeah.
It's so expensive now. Before we could do our car for about £50. Now it's 100 to 80 to 100 pounds. So it's very expensive on a full tank of petrol. Yeah,
that's expensive. You bet it is.
Yeah.
And and all of that is reflected on everything. You know, so like I say, it's a simple cure. Ignore Joe Biden. Mm. He and the Biden regime are just like the musical group the Monkees. The Monkees weren't even a real group, and these guys are just
monkeys. I love that. You bring such perspective. Every time we think we've got a grasp on it, we've got to get our notebook back out and go and research more, because you just take us to new avenues. So I want to thank you for your investment, because they look forward to these programs. And we will see you next week. Just to say, I know so many of you want it to be more than an hour, but because a lot of you are watching the previous studio for 2 hours, 3 hours is a lot to sit through. And Dr. Pidgeon is very concerned about that. But we want to thank you for your commitment. And we will see you next Tuesday and on Friday with Dr. Pidgeon and Scott Bennett. Y'all bless for now. Take care.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Stephen.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Two people laughed. Two people cried. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Ever seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby? Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there. Somewhere.